Hare Krishna. Whatever you do, I'll move it some other way. Hare Krishna. Jai Jagannath. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jai Radha Kunja Vihari. Jai Radha Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Chari Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paschati Satari Pancha Kapadurvyascha Kripashinduvyavacha Titanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram Ram Hare Hare. So we're going to be talking about self-honesty and self-deception. And I believe we're going to be doing this every night. Is that correct? Every night? Till you get tired of me and send me back to America. Okay. So, self-honesty requires a person's ability to be objective about themselves, to be able to see themselves as they are. And that is difficult for most of us. Generally, you'll find people think they're either better than they are or worse than they are. And some people will think both. Better and worse at the same time. Okay. It's just the lighting is not good. It's the altar. Trying to do this so this is not in front of everybody. There was a survey amongst CEOs, and they asked them, amongst all CEOs in the world, what percentage do you think you are in? And all of them said the top 10%. So of course, if you know anything about math, 100% can't be in the top 10%. Only 10% can be in the, not 90%, only 10%. So, generally people think they're better than they are. But there are people who have what's called low self-esteem. So people with low self-esteem are the opposite of arrogant people. Arrogant people estimate themselves higher. People with low self-esteem estimate themselves lower. So maybe your abilities here, if you're arrogant, you'll think your abilities here. If you have low self-esteem, you'll think your abilities here. Although, whatever the case is, your ability is the same. So that's one problem with honest self-examination, that it's difficult. It's much easier for us to understand or see the lackings or the good qualities of another person than it is to see ourselves. It's harder to see than ourselves. So if you have low self-esteem and you see another person like yourself, you may tend to think they're better than you. If you have arrogance, you see another person like yourself, you'll tend to think they're lower than you. Or you'll tend to think, this person is arrogant. But you may not see it in yourself. It's easier to see others. So when we talk about self-honesty, the first challenge is gaining objectivity, because we tend to see ourselves through our ego. Our ego wants to think of ourselves in a certain way, and we tend to see ourselves that way. Could I get some water? There is water. It's just... Thank you. So we all have this problem. Everybody has a problem. At least everyone who's in the modes of nature has this problem. To actually understand themselves, where their faults lie, where their good qualities lie, where they're situated spiritually. We may think we're more advanced than we are. We may think we're less advanced than we are. You might say, well, if I think I'm less advanced than I am, maybe that's good. Yes, in one sense it's good. But in another sense, you may have abilities and intelligence you don't even realize you have, or you don't want to admit that you could use in Krishna service. So if you become too humble, then you may not acknowledge what you can do, and you may be asked to do something and say, no, I can't do it, I'm not qualified. So that wouldn't be humility, that would be lack of objectivity. Because someone may say, well, you should always be humble. You should always think you have no good qualities. But when it comes to doing service, yes, you should be humble, which means, no, you might have good qualities. Humility just means they're not yours. Krishna gave them to you. But humility doesn't mean to completely deny that you have them. If I give a good class and you say, Mahatma Prabhu, you gave a good class, it really helped me, it wouldn't really be right for me to say, no, it was a bad class and I didn't help you. Because you just told me I helped you. So, okay, let me accept that. But humility would be that Krishna has given me the words. And I don't identify from the false ego that this is my power. But it's not humility to deny the fact that something happened. Like with Srila Prabhupada, you can't deny the fact that he spread Krishna consciousness all over the world, and Prabhupada did not deny it. He just denied that he was qualified to do it, and that the qualification came from his guru. But it would be foolish to deny it. If you said, Srila Prabhupada or A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, you spread Krishna consciousness all over the world, no one has done it before. And Prabhupada says, no, I didn't. That's not humility. He said, no, it was spread, but it was the mercy of my Guru Maharaj. So that's humility. So we need some objectivity about our good qualities and our abilities, because we need to use them. We just don't want to become identified with them. And if we become falsely humble and say, no, I'm not good at this or that, when in fact you are, then what would be the point? Because then you may not use it for Krishna. That would be like saying, I say to you, you just got a new job, now you're the CEO of Google, and they're paying you like, 10 lakhs every month. And I say, oh Prabhu, you're rich. And you say, no, I'm not. What would be the point? You say, no, I don't have any money. What would be the point? It doesn't make sense. You have money, now you can use money in Krishna service. You may want to be humble and say, this is Krishna's mercy on me, and somehow or other Krishna has graced me with this money. You could say all these things, but the fact is you have it, so why would you deny it? Why would you pretend it doesn't exist? Because they can't use it. So this brings us to the next problem. The next problem, it comes when false ego doesn't want to acknowledge a problem. Like sometimes you tell somebody that they do something and they deny it. No, I don't do that. Or you shouldn't do this. No, I don't do that. Or why did you do that? No, I didn't do that. Or you always do this. No, I never do that. So that's when the false ego gets in the way. When there's something that is wrong, but the false ego thinks, no, I don't have that problem. But the false ego can't bear to acknowledge that I do have the problem because I never thought I did have the problem. I always thought I was the opposite. And sometimes it's so bad that there's so much evidence coming to us from outside of us that we're a certain way, but still the false ego doesn't want to acknowledge it. It will deny it, even in spite of evidence. So that's the second problem. If you're lost, you're going in the wrong direction, and you deny it, what's going to happen? You'll continue to be lost. If you acknowledge you're lost, you can then find out the right direction and get to your destination. So the false ego, it gets in the way, and then we may have a problem we don't acknowledge, and that problem continues. And we suffer because of it. The other day I was giving an example. And the example was given in answer to a question. And the question is, well, if I discover a problem, how is it that I can remain enthusiastic once I realize that I have some pretty big problems to deal with? Or Jagannath Swami, I have some big problems to deal with that I've been pretending I don't have. And you're asking me to be more honest about them, and now I'm being honest, and now I find them. And so now, how do I not become discouraged? Because I was pretending I didn't have the problem. But now you won't let me pretend anymore, so you've either pointed out the problem or you've helped me find the problem, and now I'm discouraged. And so this is common, isn't it? You see in an artha, you see a fault in yourself. You think, oh, I'm so critical, or I'm envious, or I'm never satisfied, or I think I'm very detached, but when I actually look at my life, I see I'm not. Or whatever it may be, and then you become discouraged. So I gave an example, which I think can help us. It happens sometimes that a person is, these flowers, when they touch my neck, they give me rashes. I don't know why. But they smell good. But I can't really wear them. So, sometimes you go to a doctor and you tell the doctor, I'm very tired. The doctor checks you, takes your blood work, checks everything, and says, there's nothing wrong with you. It's very common. No, doctor, but I'm tired all the time. There must be something wrong with me. No, we did all the tests, nothing wrong. And so you leave the office and you think, not a very good doctor. Right? You're not happy. You want him to find something wrong because you want to cure this tiredness. And if he doesn't find anything wrong, then you go home thinking, I'm just going to be tired all the time because he never found out what was wrong with him. Right? Something different? Warm. So then you go to another doctor. He does all the tests. Feels your pulse. Says, too much pitta. Or too much vata. Or too much something. Or not enough something. And that's why you're tired. And you're very happy he found out what was wrong. Because now he can cure the problem and you'll get your strength back. And if he didn't find out what was wrong with you, you would think, this doctor is useless. I want to know what's wrong. So why, when it comes to spiritual life, would we not want to know what's wrong? Because the ego thinks, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm a good devotee, I'm a good person, I have good sadhana, etc., etc. The ego does not want to acknowledge what's wrong. That's a huge mistake. It's like your car is making a noise. And I get in the car and I say, I think there's something wrong with your brakes. No. No, worse. Let's go worse. I think there's something wrong with your transmission. You don't want to hear that because to fix your transmission is expensive. So you rather think the click is just, don't worry about it. Click. Isn't it? You ever had that problem? If you have a car or a scooter, sometimes it makes some noise, you don't want to bring it in because you're afraid maybe it's something major. They'll tell you, take it to the junkyard, it's finished, you need a new scooter or you need a new engine or something. So sometimes we're like that. We don't want to find out what's wrong because the ego will be scarred. When it's revealed, we're not as great as we thought we were. But that is one of the challenges with self-reflection. The ego wants to protect the false conception that I'm better than I am. Okay. So, but point is, if there is a problem, then it's better we acknowledge the problem because then we can fix the problem. And if you pretend there is no problem, there's nothing to fix because you won't acknowledge anything's wrong with it. Click, oh, that's nothing. But in fact, your transmission is breaking down. And if you don't fix it, it will be destroyed. Does that make sense? Part of the process of advancing in spiritual life is becoming aware. Sometimes we do japa retreats and we chant 64 rounds. And on those days when devotees chant 64 rounds is when they become most aware of their weaknesses, of their faults, of their lack of time. That day, now it sounds like a contradiction, doesn't it? On the day you chant more, you become more aware of what's wrong with you. Because you might think on the day I chant more, I would become more purified of the things that are wrong with me. But rather, I'm becoming more aware. So what is interesting about that? That means that purification means more awareness of where I need to improve. Right? And so, on those days when devotees become more aware of their anarthas, they become more discouraged. But, there's an interesting fact. Were those anarthas there before the devotee became aware of them? Yes or no? Yes. Or did they just appear on the 64 round day? They fell down from the demigods. No, they were there. And so now they're depressed that they've discovered them. But the proper understanding, the proper way to understand is they were already there. It was your ignorance that you weren't aware of it. Now you've become purified, so you're aware of it, so you should celebrate. Right? You're making advancement. So I'm realizing all the things that are wrong with me. They were always wrong with you. You just never realized it. That's your problem. Now you realize it, you should be happy. It goes the other way around. Now we get depressed. I'm realizing everything wrong with me. That's when you should celebrate. What's the use of being a devotee? There's so many things wrong. I chant 64 rounds and all I see is my problems. Good, congratulations. That's better than you were yesterday when you had all those problems and you didn't see them. You're one level up now. So this is what it means to become purified. That you see the problems. You're aware of them. And as we said, once you're aware, you can do something. If you're not aware, you can't do anything. And so, There's no reason to be discouraged when you realize what you need to work on. But rather, we should be happy. Another challenge we have, similar to this, is that we're not carefully evaluating our level of spiritual advancement. Because if we think we're higher than we are, that's going to be a problem. We're going to try to renounce or achieve what is impossible or difficult. If we think we're lower than they are, then we won't strive for enough. We won't strive enough. And we'll miscalculate what we can achieve, what service we can do on what level and so forth. If you're very low and think you're very high, then I want to become Jagat Guru. No, not yet. But if you're ready to be Jagat Guru and you don't think you are, that's also a problem. Because you need to know you're qualified. You can do this service. You're able to do it. If you think you're more renounced than you are, but maybe you need to get married and you don't, or maybe you're married and you think you're more renounced than you are and you want to renounce it, and then you renounce it, and then 3 years later you get married to somebody else. So you've seen these things happen. So you have to know, or I'm more renounced, and then it doesn't work. You have to know where you're at. And sometimes it's hard to know not because it's difficult to know, it's because we don't want to know. Because maybe what we really need to know is not happy news. I'm not as advanced as I thought I was. And it's not good news. I'm not as detached as I thought I was, and I don't want to admit it because then it's like discouraged. After all these years, it's still, I need this, I need that. But if you need it, it's like eating. If you need it, eat it. Don't starve. So this is part of self-honesty. And then there's another important aspect of self-honesty, maybe one of the most important. And this is probably where we're lacking the most as an organization. Sometimes we can't be honest. Because if I'm honest with you about my weaknesses, you might use it against me. You might get me removed from my position. Dude, you realize what Mahatma Prabhu told me? Oh my God, I have to call the GBC. Tell them to remove him. We're afraid if we are too honest with others, we'll be condemned and there'll be some ramification. Or maybe we're afraid that others were expecting that we were better, and I don't want to disappoint them. I don't want to tell them I don't want to tell them really what I'm like, because that would be discouraging. I'll just make them believe that I'm more advanced than I am, because that's how they see me. But sometimes they say, your identity comes from how other people see you. So you act according to how they see you because you want to please them. So sometimes people might see us as advanced, and then we want to act that way, even though we may not be. That's a kind of service, but it's a kind of dishonesty also. It's a kind of pretension. I'm pretending to be something I'm not. And we don't all want to pretend. That wouldn't make Prabhupada happen. But the point is, if we have a problem and we can't talk about it with anybody, how are we going to solve the problem? So if I have a problem and I'm afraid to tell you because I'm afraid you're going to tell the temple president, and he's going to say, I don't want you coming to the temple anymore because, I tell you, I stole something. All right, that's it. Can't come to the temple, and he stole something. But maybe I have this problem that I steal things, and I need to talk about it. And so, in a religious society where our morals, ethics, and values are so high, sometimes we're afraid to talk about our own failings out of fear we'll be condemned. If you live in a brahmachari ashram, the fear is I will be asked to leave. If I have a position of authority, they'll pull me out of that position, or I'll be embarrassed publicly, or I'll be embarrassed throughout the world as soon as someone puts it on Facebook. So we don't talk. The problem is, if we have a problem, and it's a difficult problem, and it's going on for years, we need to talk about it, right? Because if you don't talk about it, how do you solve it? And so that's another problem with self-honesty. We may know the problem, but there's no one that we're afraid to talk about it with anybody. And so then the problem we just live with the problem. And we don't know what to do. That's not good. So along with individual self-honesty, you have to create a social self-honesty where you have groups or individuals you can discuss your challenges with that remain confidential, and those groups or individuals are dedicated to helping you, not condemning you and destroying you, but allowing you to speak and helping you solve those problems. So that is something that, of course, we can't solve tonight, or not even this week or this month, but it's something that certainly we need to be developing as a community. At least we don't want to develop as a community where we pretend to be more Krishna conscious than we are just because, well, I've been a devotee for 25 years, so you're all thinking I should be this Krishna conscious, so I have to make sure I act in a way that you believe it, because that will make you happy. It's not really what we're trying to cultivate. Rather, we're trying to cultivate an environment in which even someone who should be here, who's not here, can talk about his challenges and not be condemned. Jagannath Swami Ki Jai, Srila Bhagavan Ki Jai, Lakshman Singha Ki Jai, Srivadaya Krishna Krishna Krishna, Srimati Bhakti. So, in the Christian church they have what's called confession. And in Nectar Devotion, confession is listed under the title of submissiveness. And the devotee's not confessing, in this case, not confessing to another devotee. He's confessing to the deity of what he did. This is where I am. I'm embarrassed to confess, but I must confess. So confession is part of the process of purification. And a lot of times when you're struggling with something, it has a hold on you until you can talk about it with somebody else. And then by talking about it, the energy that's or the addiction, whatever it is that's holding you, that's controlling you, starts to lessen as you talk. And if you're the person who's listening and not talking, then in order to help another person talk, then you must be able to listen without judging, without telling them, oh, this is so bad, how could you do that? Imagine you're telling someone something, you did it, and it was bad, and you need to talk about it, and they're telling you, this is so bad, I can't believe you did this. So how are you going to feel? And you're like, okay, I'm not going to talk about it. So, in creating an environment in which it's safe to speak, it has to be safe to speak to you, all of you sitting here, and everyone in the community. We have to make it safe. So, if you're telling the person, this was so bad, I can't believe you did it, that doesn't enable them to speak. And if you feel a need to tell others, then that destroys everything, because they're only telling you because they believe you won't tell anybody, or you would only tell someone that could help them who would also keep it confidential. So here's the news of the day. In case you didn't know, everyone who's not a pure devotee has problems. Did you know that? Even the ones who don't look like they have problems, they have problems. Because until you have prema, or okay, we'll say bhava, rati, alright, until you're up in that area, yeah, conditioned soul has problems. Okay, less problems as you go down, less as you go up, less problems, obviously. But we know from reading Bhagavatam Mahabharata that even sometimes elevated souls have problems. They become angry, or some apsara comes and bewilders their mind, or they become bewildered by wealth or power, like Indra. Indra's always getting in trouble. Pride, right? And even Brahma became proud. And Brahma even became overcome by lust. And we read all these stories. We know it's not easy to have a body. So until we're on a very elevated level, we all have problems. It just may not seem like it. And the reason it doesn't seem like it is because more advanced devotees always keep themselves in a position where their problems won't be a problem. Or as much as possible, where their problems won't be activated. They keep themselves strong. So it looks like they don't have any problems, they're just keeping themselves strong. Like, you have diabetes, you take your insulin. So you tell me you have diabetes, but I look at you and go, well, you look fine. Yeah, because I take my insulin. But I have a problem if I don't take it. It's going to be a problem. So we all have problems, and we all need friends, yes? And sometimes we all need to talk about our problems. So more advanced devotees are just better at taking care of themselves. And more advanced devotees always have friends with whom they can talk about their problems. And sometimes it's not problems, it's just challenges, or it's just questions, or decisions they have to make. They're not sure what to do. There was a devotee named Jadunandan Swami from Spain, and he went back to university and he did his dissertation on the sannyas ashram. And as part of his dissertation, he interviewed many sannyasis. And some of the sannyasis he interviewed were former sannyasis. They gave up their sannyas. And so it was interesting because now he could, for his doctorate, he needed people who fell down because he needed to know why. And one of the most common reasons was I was lonely, had no friends, nobody to talk to. Have you ever heard the saying, it's lonely at the top? The higher you go, it's like the less people that are like you. Or people feel like you're some god and they can't be your friend or something. But often the people at the top are the ones who need friends the most because it's so lonely. So it just shows that even advanced devotees, the devotees who took sannyas, that means they were advanced, they were doing well, but they couldn't remain well unless they had friends. I was just told recently that one of our godbrothers who travels a lot, GBC, he's a guru, he's a sannyasi, he said, he tries to spend about 60% of his time with his godbrothers. He just, in his travels, he makes that arrangement. So that's a form of protection. Try to put myself in a situation where I won't just be with disciples, but I'll be with godbrothers, because we can talk about things that I couldn't talk with my disciples about, things which are important. To me personally, it may be philosophical things, sensitive philosophical issues we need to speak about. It'd be doubts, like that. So, from what I've seen in myself and what I've seen in others, some people have an easier time being honest with themselves, and some people have a difficult time. And I've done workshops where we would ask difficult questions, and some people, I would read their answers, and they didn't answer the question at all. They answered around it. So the question was penetrating. And I don't even think they realized that they didn't answer the question. They didn't even come close. They weren't even on the target. Speak of hitting the bullseye. They didn't even hit the target. So I think some of us have some resistance to being too honest with ourselves. It's like we've never been. We don't know what it means. We don't know how to do it. And we go, maybe we've been pretending to be somebody we're not. We don't even realize it. I can give an example of this. One of the common areas which all of us have a difficult time confronting is that all of us, we have things that we resist dealing with. They're just very difficult to deal with. And so if I ask you, is there anything in your life you're just resisting dealing with? And dealing with maybe even mean thinking about it. What to speak of actually dealing with it, I don't even want to think about it. And that's usually how it is. What about this? And I don't want to think about it. Let's talk about this. I don't want to talk about it. You have something like that? You're resisting? And if I brought it up, and said, can we talk about it later? Or it's too difficult, or it puts me in anxiety. I just don't. Usually we all have that. And so, if I ask you, what is it that you're resisting? Some of you will have a difficult time answering that question. I didn't even want to think about it. Or give me some other answer. It's not important, or doesn't matter, or something like that. So that's an example of lack of self-honesty. There are things we don't want to face. Maybe failures in the past or failures in the present, and I ask you how you're doing in this area. It's very uncomfortable to talk about because you're failing and you don't want to talk about it. Does that make sense? That's why self-honesty is important, because we could be building a fortress around the things that we need to face, but because we have a resistance, we're uncomfortable or afraid to deal with them, then we just build a wall around it. And that's not good. Usually when you resist something, it's because you're afraid to deal with it, and if you're afraid to deal with it, then the natural question to ask is, why are you afraid? What are you afraid of? What could possibly happen? And my personal experience is that if you're afraid to deal with something, and you deal with it, it is a huge relief. You actually feel good because you finally dealt with something that you've been running from. And that thing that you're running from, or pretending it's not there, is causing a problem in your life. And the reason you become happy when you deal with it is because you start to solve the problem that avoiding dealing with that has created. Does that make sense? So you would think, I'm afraid to deal with this, or it's painful to deal with it, or I don't want to acknowledge it. But when you actually deal with it, you become relieved because now you're dealing with something that is a problem for you and you're starting to find solutions. So you actually become happy. Although it's counterintuitive because when you think about it, it puts you in anxiety. And usually we shut down. I discovered something I think is extremely important about this. If we have a problem, as I said, if we have a problem and we're unwilling to face it, that's bad because the problem is a problem and it's creating a problem in our life. And it's generally creating a problem for other people in our life. Right? And so if we don't deal with it because it's too difficult to change, or we're afraid we can't change, or whatever the reason, but that we resist it, if you analyze, because of how that problem makes you feel, that's why you don't deal with it. Because it's very uncomfortable. The feeling that surrounds the problem is uncomfortable. Because it's uncomfortable, we just don't touch the problem. We put it away in the closet. I don't want to touch this. Right? It's the experience that surrounds the problem that's preventing us from dealing with it because it's uncomfortable or it's painful. That's why we resist it. That's what resist. If I ask you a question, what are you resisting? It's even painful to write it down. Because surrounding anything you're resisting is a fear or some painful thought or emotion. That's why you don't want to deal with it. And often the thought is, I don't know how to deal with it. I can't deal with it. I can't change. Something like that. And it could be causing you lots of trouble. Could be causing someone in your life lots of trouble. And to think about the problem, you have to think about all the trouble it's causing you or that person, and you just rather not think about it. And that's why you resist it, because the emotion surrounding that thought is too painful to even deal with. Does that make sense? Now, to make it worse, it'll get better in the next few days. I have to make it worse first. Of course, if I make it too bad, you won't come back tomorrow. Let me try to put this into Krishna conscious context, because this might sound maybe a little bit too much psychological. Srila Prabhupada talks a lot about pretension. Pretension means to pretend. To pretend to be someone or something you're not. And he describes pretension as a huge stumbling block on the path of bhakti, because you're pretending to be more Krishna conscious than you are. You're showing two faces, one to the world, but you have another face that you show to everyone else in your life, more in private, like what you would show to your family or what you would show to work, and then you have another face at the temple. The face of the pure devotee at the temple and the face of the monster at home, or whatever, the werewolf, like that. So, Prabhupada, and the way Prabhupada uses it more often is someone who's posing to be Krishna conscious, and then they go home and they smoke and they drink and so forth. But I think for a lot of us, what may be more relevant is I'm posing to be Krishna conscious, but when I go at home, I just fall under the influence of modes of nature. Maybe not smoking and drinking, but very tamasic behavior or rajasic behavior, which is not becoming of a devotee, or even becoming of a Brahmin. And that becomes, and then we, in the association of devotees, we may get honor for being Krishna conscious, when in our personal life we may not be. That's a kind of pretension. And so this is something also we have to acknowledge, if it is a fact, or potentially at least it's there. It can be there for any of us. So we want to acknowledge this. This is a challenge. So I understand clearly that these challenges are made more difficult when we exist within a society, a devotee society, where we're all expecting one another to basically be perfect, more or less. Yes? I mean, you're a devotee, you're wearing a dhoti. You have tilak dhoti kota sari choli. You look like a devotee, so I expect you're going to act like one. You come to the temple, and you look very Krishna conscious, you act very Krishna conscious. So I would expect that. And you know that I expect that. And so that creates a problem in you being honest with me. Or me even knowing, me being honest with you about you, because I don't know anything about you other than what I see in the temple. But maybe there's a whole dark side to you that I should know because I could help you, or it would be good for you if you could tell me. But we kind of pretend that everything is just fine. And so I think it's a big illusion that everything is just fine for everybody. We're conditioned souls trying to become purified. It's fine we have prasadam. It's fine we have kirtan. It's fine we have class. Everything is fine on that level. But the internal process is a slow and gradual process, and it's not always fine inside. And so if we acknowledge that, and we create an environment where these things can be more openly discussed in some formal setting or through mentorship or through friendship, it's going to help us a lot. You know, you may have difficulty being objective about your own faults, but others can help you. They won't have that difficulty. It'll be easier for them to tell you more about yourself than you may realize. That's why we need this situation. Not all of us are that capable of being 100% objective, but through friends, mentors, or groups of devotees who work on being honest with one another, we can learn where we need to improve, and we can also learn how to improve. You know, sometimes the fear of admitting a fault is not that I can't admit the fault, it's just that I don't know what to do. I have no idea how to solve it, so I just don't want to think about it. It's just depressing to think about because I don't know what to do about it. But that's where the Sangha comes in. That's where we need help. If you sometimes go to another devotee and say, I have this fault, I have this problem, they'll probably say, you know what, I have it also. Or I used to have it, and this is what I did, or this is what I'm doing now. Or I also have this problem, I don't have the solution, let's go to so-and-so, we'll ask him. That's the human nature of the human nature of our condition. And so I'll tell you a funny story. There was a workshop we went to, and in this workshop we were asked to be very open about our challenges. There were maybe 20 of us, 25. It's a little awkward. Normally, in a group that size, and there were men and women, we're not that open, but we're asked to be more open. And so there was a young man there, he had a very difficult life growing up. His father was a devotee, but his father had slipped and fallen away, and I think his father became an alcoholic or a drug addict, or at least was dealing with these problems and not steadily working. So this is how he was raised. A very, very difficult situation. And he had a lot of problems. He had a lot of anger because he didn't have a stable upbringing, so he was very angry about that. And he came to the workshop thinking that his problems were more numerous and severe than any of the adults. And he came out of the workshop realizing the adults had more problems than he had. And he thought that helped him so much, knowing that. Because he realized at least some of the adults had more psychological trouble than even he had. And he thought, how is that possible? Because my childhood was horrible. And yours wasn't, but still, you have so many problems. So, we have lifetimes of samskaras. And we all process the world differently. So, I always remember this. And he was actually laughing when he realized how we had more problems than he had. It made him feel like, I guess I'm not so bad after all. So, when we're more open with one another, then we start to see that others have similar or the same problems we have. And although it sounds funny, there is the saying that misery loves company, right? You know that saying? Misery loves company. And so when you realize that others are challenged in similar ways or exactly in the same way, that's a bit encouraging. Oh, I'm not so bad after all. And this is real life. This is what it means to practice devotional service. These are real anarthas that all conditioned souls face, and I'm not the only one going through this. That is very comforted, not in a demoniac way. No, I'm so happy you're all suffering. Not like that. But I'm happy to know I'm not the only one. I'm happy to know that I'm normal. And that there's not something wrong with me that, I couldn't move in the ashram, or I wanted to get married, or I'm having such a difficult time overcoming this or that. And it's nice to know, well, Prabhu, well, Mataji, that's pretty normal. It's Kali Yuga, it's 2020, and if you didn't have those problems, I would be worried about you. Like something is wrong with you, like you have them, but you don't realize you have them. So, in that sense, we can feel more normal in our challenges. And so, the point of this topic is not to discourage you, but it's to make you realize that the challenges you have are normal. And unless we're honest with ourselves, we're not going to realize what those challenges are. And unless we have some close associates, we're not going to talk about those challenges. And if we don't talk, it's going to be problematic to overcome them. So that's just kind of an introduction to this topic. I just met with a devotee last week. Maybe he's been a devotee 35 years. And he knows a little bit about the kind of work I do, and he said, I really need to talk to you. And he was talking about this topic, how we all have problems, and we all, on whatever level we are on, from the beginning to the topmost devotee, we all need some sangha where we can talk about our challenges. Sometimes the problems are not so internal, they're external. You're going into a new service, or you're starting a new project, and there's this whole set of circumstances you've never dealt with before. And you need to talk about it with someone. And sometimes in new circumstances, these new circumstances become a catalyst for reactions. And you start reacting in ways you've never reacted before, and you start to see things about yourself you didn't know existed. Like I could pretty much guarantee you, if right now I gave you 1,000 disciples and a few crores of rupees, it would affect you in a way you've never been affected before. That would be a new challenge. And nothing happened internally except externally. There's a new environment, and now you have to deal with it. Right? So sometimes it's not even about pulling out all the stuff inside. It's just talking about, here's my new service and my new challenge, and this is how it's affecting me, and I need to talk. So that's what he was talking about. And he was asking me, do you have a group? Do you know who has a group? Do you know? And basically, I said, I know of a few groups, not many. And he felt 100%, 108% certain that this is one of the most important things we can do, is create a sangha where we can be more open, with one another, maybe small groups of devotees who are willing to do this, willing to help one another. And that way we can deal with self-honesty and remove self-deception, so we can understand exactly who we are, where we are, what we need, how to get there, and remove resistances to doing that. So I'll end here, and then we can take questions, and there is a comment by somebody. But it's hard to read the comments the way the light is. This background is hard to read. Maybe I'll move it. Anyway, you have any questions, comments? Yes.
You were telling me we should know at which stage we are, but how can we know at which stage we are presently?
It's a good question. How do we know what stage we're in? Well, it's part of the self-honesty process. And sometimes it's difficult when you begin Krishna consciousness. Because often for new devotees, they think they're more advanced than they are. Because they're coming out of a very toxic situation, and they're starting to become devotees, and everything is ecstatic and blissful, and they're very inspired and enthusiastic, and everything is new and fresh. And in that environment, you can think you're more detached than you actually are. So sometimes it's difficult in the beginning, and therefore we need senior devotees to help us. To understand there's so many decisions you have to make. Should I continue my job? Should I change my job? Should I get married? Should I remain single? Should I move in an ashram? What service should I do? All these things. What am I qualified to do? These things sometimes require the discussion with senior devotees. But we should also be objective about our detachment, and also objective about our attraction to Krishna consciousness.
Objective means really like how?
Objective means real, as opposed to subjective means it's your view, which may be skewed. Some philosophers say there is no objectivity outside of Shastra, because we're subjective people who tend to see things through the filter of our own consciousness. So, because of that, we need others who can give us objectivity. But still, as far as possible, we have to be realistic about our advancement. So, it's a problem. Sometimes we're not realistic. We might say, I might say, do you like to read Prabhupada's books? And you'll say, yes, I love to read. And I'll say, when was the last time you read it? Oh, 10 days ago. So you think you love to read them, and I don't doubt that you do. But if you really love to read them, why haven't you read them for 10 days? I love to eat, and I haven't, I've been eating every day. Some days I don't read, but I eat. So I can definitely objectively say I love to eat. So the point is that sometimes we may think something to be true, but it's not when you actually look at your actions. So that's what it means to be more objective. So I tell myself, I like to chant, I like to do this. Well, what time do you get up to chant? How many rounds do you chant before work? Well, I only chant 2 rounds before work. That's, in my book, that's not liking to chant. You say, well, but I go to bed late. Yeah, but what do you do the last 2 hours before you go to bed? Do you do anything that important? That keeps you up late, so you get up late. All these things. So that's being objective. Another aspect of being objective is you'll make excuses. Well, I do this because of A, B, and C. Then you have to ask yourself, are those excuses? Or are those things which I cannot avoid? They're realities that I have to face. Maybe you need to sleep 8 hours. And if you don't, you'll get sick, or you can't function at work. But maybe you don't. So So these are, you have to see some are these are realities which you can't adjust, and some are excuses that you're making. You convince yourself that you can't. So that you have to start looking at. Am I just making excuses? No, I really can't get it. I can only chant 2 rounds before I go to work. Okay. Then I tell you, well, I want to make a bet with you. And I want you to bet all the money you have. And if you're married, I want you to bet your wife. And if your mother and father are alive, I want you to bet them. I want you to bet everything. That statement that you made, I can only chant 2 rounds before work, is 100% absolutely, undeniably true. Would you bet everything on that when you think about it? You have to think. That's how you know if you're making an excuse or not. Because if you wouldn't bet everything on that being true, you're probably making an excuse that I can only chant 2 rounds before work. Right? So that's a good question to ask yourself. Okay, if I say this, is it 100% absolutely true? I cannot do this. Would you bet your life savings on the truth of that statement that I cannot do this? And then you see, okay, am I making an excuse? Why do I make it? What's the excuse? Could I do better? That's being objective. So it's like challenging yourself. I say I like to chant, challenge yourself. I say I like to read, challenge yourself. I say I'm detached, challenge yourself. Ask yourself, oh, if you're so detached, then why are you thinking about this? Or why do you spend so much time doing this? So that way you can get some objectivity. Like challenge yourself like you were a coach challenging somebody else. Or another way of saying, well, I think I'm like this. Then the question is, would a person who's like that do this or think like this? Maybe the answer is yes, they would. That's good. So that means what you said is true. But if the answer is no, they wouldn't think like this, then what you said is not true. So in that way, you can try to understand yourself a little better. You may not be perfect, none of us will be, but as you start doing it, you'll get better at it. Because a lot of us are not used to doing this. We don't even think about it. We don't stop and think, well, how Krishna conscious am I? All right, let's look at austerity. Let's ask question about us. We asked question about chanting, asked about reading. What about austerity? How austere are you? Then you start looking at your life. What time do I go to bed? What time do I get up? What am I eating? What am I sacrificing that I'm attached to that's getting in the way of my devotional service? So we ask these kinds of questions. Then we get it. We start to say, oh, I'm not as Krishna conscious as I thought I was. Oh, I'm starting to understand where I'm at. But then, when you answer these questions, then you might say, I don't think I can be more austere yet. This is what I need. So now you're getting kind of a reality check on what you need. So knowing where you're at doesn't necessarily mean it's time to change anything. It may also mean that I need this much rest. I need to eat this way. I need these material things. It stabilizes me. So it's good to know. Because if I don't know that, I'll try to renounce them, and then when I renounce them, it'll backfire. I won't be able to do it. So it's not always a self-judgment of what's right or wrong or good or bad. It's just an analysis of this is what I'm doing, and then the question, can I do better, or is this the best I can do now? Do I need this? Like if I told you, don't eat any sweets, you might end up killing somebody next week. Right? So no, I need to eat my sweet, because if I don't eat my sweet, I don't know what I'll do. I'll go crazy. Okay, at least you know. You've admitted that. That's good to know. You're going to make sure you get your sweet every day. because you don't want to kill anybody. And then maybe at some point in the future you'll think, okay, now I'm ready to give up my sweet. Or I'm going to cut it down to 1 sweet a week instead of 7 a week. Okay, can you do that? Then, do it if you can. Like we're instructed, don't make vows we can't keep, because we want to be steady. So, being steady is important. Even if you're a little less austere, but you're steady at it, it's better than being up and down. So these are all questions and things to think about, to understand where we're at. And then when we understand where we're at, we decide what to do about it. Maybe nothing. Maybe that's just good. This is where I'm at and it's good. It's helping me. Or maybe I thought I was up here, now I realize I'm here and I want to be up here. What can I do to change? Now I know I'm really not up here, but this is where I want to be. So, does that help? You could be self-reflective about your japa. Like sometimes when we're doing japa workshops, I will ask the devotees, on a scale of 1 to 10, analyze your japa right now. And then when they analyze it, sometimes they realize it's really bad. But they never really analyzed it before. So it's good to do. It's good to be realistic. Oh, now I know on a scale of 1 to 10, it's at a 3. I really need to work. I have to get at least to 6. That's where it needs to be, 6 or above. Okay, so I made an honest assessment. That's good. Right? If you're married, all right, make an honest assessment of your marriage on a scale of 1 to 10. Then you know it may not be as good as it needs to be, and then you ask yourself, what can I do to improve it? And as a side point, whatever score men give themselves in their marriage, their wife always gives 3 points less. So, there's so many problems in the marriage, and the man thinks, everything's fine because she hasn't yelled at me in a month, so it must be fine. But then a woman gives a score, and you say, why? And she tells you all the things wrong you didn't know. So that's also interesting. That's another kind of self-deception. Yeah. Which may come from false ego, or it just may come from being a man. I don't know. But that's pretty normal. Women will give a lower, they have higher ideals. You could ask your spiritual master, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, why don't you analyze me? I have my disciples write me reports every month. I ask them, analyze your Krishna consciousness on a scale of 1 to 10. So, it's good. Then you know where you're at. It's like a GPS, you know where you're at, you know where you need to go. So, if you don't know where you're at, if you don't know where you are at, then you don't know where to go. You don't know how to get there because the GPS has to find where you are. Okay, I know I want to go to Krishna Loka, okay, but where are you now? So according to where you are now, we can direct you. If you think you're almost in Krishna Loka, then the GPS is going to say, just go straight a little bit. But if you're actually in Tamagun, it's going to give you a different direction. Right? Anything else? We have a question. Oh, it's so hard to read with this back. We have. Yes.
If we are doing something, then how we can know whether it is a need or we can improve in that. We are telling something we are doing. It can be need also. So how we can decide?
How we know if it's a need or an extraneous desire?
Yeah.
Generally, if it's a need, once it's fulfilled, it stabilizes you. If it's just an external desire, it's never satisfied. It doesn't stabilize you.
For sleeping, we can take example of sleeping.
Yeah, you need to sleep for sure.
for 8 hours, somebody is sleeping for 8 hours, and he's thinking like that it is my need, but he can sleep less also.
That depends. He has to experiment. He can sleep less and fall asleep while he's driving and kill himself. Or, he can be at work, falling asleep on his computer. So that's something you have to analyze yourself. The principle, as Krishna gives in the Gita, the principle is don't sleep too much, don't sleep too little. But too much and too little is relative to the individual. And you may ask the question, but couldn't I sleep less? And only you can answer. Yeah, in theory, the answer is yes. But in practice, maybe not. So you might say, well, doesn't it depend on my inspiration? Yeah. Yes, but maybe you're not that inspired. But it also depends on your physical nature as well. So there are different factors. And so you try to understand. And so you might say, the times that I chanted better and the times I was more inspired, I found that I could get by with less sleep. Or you might say, even the times when I was inspired, I would sleep less, but still, I needed to rest more. My body just needed it. So then from experience, Okay, not too much, not too little. What is it? How much to eat? If I eat too little, then I go around all day thinking about food. If I eat too much, I get sleepy. So from experience, you figure these things out. So the question here, how does one be self-honest / develop objectivity if by nature, habit, they are extremely negative and self-critical? Because then everything that they see about themselves is going to be discouraging. Or everything just seems to be too difficult to overcome. Wouldn't it be like being stuck in a downward cycle? Yeah, it could be. It's an unhealthy psychology. But as the example we gave before, if you have a disease and you don't know it, it would be good if your doctor found it out before it kills you. So all these things you're describing about being self-critical and so forth, that's something you need to work on yourself. Because I may have the same problems that you have, and I just see them and think, okay, I need to work on them. But you see them and you start beating yourself up. Oh, you're so bad. You have all these problems, you've been a devotee so long. Rather than being self-accepting. So I would say, if this is your case or someone else's case, then I have to be a little more self-accepting. And realistic. Well, if you have the problem, you have it. What's the point of beating yourself up? You already have it. Oh, I have a stomachache, I'm so bad. No. What's the point? Oh, I ate too much yesterday, I'm such a glutton. That's not the way you deal with it. You realize, okay, I ate this and that, and I'm not going to do that anymore. And let's get better. That's the idea. So that's something that if you find that a problem, that when you see a fault in yourself, you just think, oh, I'm so bad for having a fault. That's something we need to work on separately as a psychological issue. What we would like to see is that you see the fault and you don't relate it to you being good or bad. You just work on it. And if you relate it to you being bad, you lose energy to work on it. Because then the next stage is, I'm so bad, why bother? What's the use? And then the next stage is, Krishna doesn't love me. And the next stage is, we never see you again. So that's not what Prabhupada wants. Right? You have a question? Yes.
After being objective, we become self-obsessed.
Being objective can be what? Obsessive?
Obsessive.
And give me an example.
I need to be like this. I have to do this. So we become obsessed that we start to work on
perfection complex.
Yes.
Yeah. I wouldn't call that being objective. Well, it's like the opposite end of what we just talked about. Maybe not exactly, but it's another issue that's distinct from what I'm talking about. It's the way you're processing what you're discovering. Let's say you and I both have the same problem, but we have different psychology. So we both see the problem, but we process it differently, and then the result is one of us is fine and one of us is discouraged. So having to make everything perfect it's okay if you're in Krishna Loka, but if you're down here, it's going to be a real problem. It's not going to happen. And I would rather see it as a perfection in consciousness of my. If you have a mentality to perfect yourself, I would rather try to perfect your motive. Work on that level and redefine. Anyone has this perfection complex. I always tell them, redefine what you mean by perfection. Because in spiritual life, perfection is going to be more about your attitude than your result. And if you can redefine that, if perfection for me is that I'm desiring only to please Guru and Krishna, that's something we can all achieve. It's not that difficult. So that becomes my new perfection, not that I have to achieve a certain standard. It's not bad. Well, you could say it's even good to strive for the standard, but bad to be discouraged if that standard is so high it's virtually impossible to reach. So that's a whole other issue, because when you have that issue, you also have the issue of thinking that if I achieve this level of external perfection, it means I'm Krishna conscious, and it may not mean you're Krishna conscious at all. Because you may have lost you may not have adopted the right mentality, but only you got the result, and then you define the result as perfection, when your mentality may be completely messed up. And you can control your mentality much more than you can control the external situation, isn't it? So again, it's another problem. And one thing we should know is that when Prabhupada is asking us to be objective, he's not asking us to be depressed at the same time. Get hung up on being perfect or get hung up on how bad we are. He's not asking us to do that. He's asking us to do the opposite. Or at least be healthy about it. If I think I'm bad and I become discouraged, that's just it's just the influence of the mode of ignorance. That's all. It's not Krishna consciousness. So sometimes I think we think something's Krishna conscious, but look at the result. You think it's Krishna conscious and it's depressing you, it can't be Krishna conscious. I mean, if it's depressing you spiritually, that's different. But if it's depressing you materially, how could that be Krishna conscious? Right? But sometimes we think it is. Oh, I'm so bad. I'm lamenting how fallen I am. I'm trying to be humble. And the result is I'm completely discouraged. That's not Krishna consciousness. Right? Is that okay?
If some problems are there, like which we can't solve, so what to do with that problems? Like we have to leave them like that.
For example?
It's something in our life, suppose we can't change.
How do you know you can't change? It's something that you can't change internally, or it won't change externally. Like you can't change who your mother and father is. Yeah.
Like there's something like something.
Then you learn tolerance. Or you get a job in America. Sometimes you have to change the situation if you can't change it inside. But I would question also what I can change, what I can't. Some things we can change. Some things we can't, but a lot of the things we can change are just responses to the things we can't change. Because here's a problem. It's so common. I'm in a situation and I naturally respond a certain way. And I've always responded that way to that situation my whole life. And so because I've always responded that way, then I think I can't change my response because I don't know any other response. But just ask yourself the question, is there another way to respond? Could I respond a different way? And you realize, yes, I could respond in a different way. But because we never have, sometimes we think we can't change. Sometimes we can't even imagine a different response. But there may be a different response. Right? Right? You agree? What if? Yes. Your turn. Okay.
Number of times negative thoughts come in our mind.
Yes.
We feel very afraid to discuss with our because maybe negative thoughts come in their mind also. How do they handle it?
He's saying, if I have negative thoughts and I don't want to share them because I think I'll pollute another devotee. And find the right devotee. Yeah, it may be true that if the devotee's young, it could disturb his mind. So if you want to find a devotee who's a little more mature, or you want to describe the problem and don't get too graphic. If I had this dream, and in this dream, she was coming at me and she had blue eyes, blonde, she was about this tall and this way. No. You may spare the details. Yes?
Yeah, I didn't understand the meaning of objective.
Say
I didn't get the meaning of objective.
objective. You know the meaning of subjective? Objective is as it is. Subjective means as you think it is. From your angle of vision. Like you're on an airplane, your subjective view is a house looks like about this big. But objectively, it's, not this big. So subjective is your view from your angle, objective is what it actually is. I think I'm great. I think I'm the best devotee in the world. That's subjective. Objectively, it's not true. Yes?
Similar questions, like how to change, when we are in a situation like we are more lethargic in that way, like we are not able to change ourselves.
How to change? If we can't change? Well, Krishna has made nice arrangements for that. It's called suffering. So, if you're not experiencing suffering, you can experience suffering on another level, just by imagining what your life is going to be like if you don't change. And then imagine what it would be like if you did change. And then that will create perhaps an inspiration through realizing that if I don't change, there'll be so much suffering. And if I do change, there'll be so much benefit. So you get inspiration from that. Because if you're lethargic, it means you're lacking inspiration. And so to overcome the lethargy, you need inspiration. Right? A lot of times when we don't do something, we think we're lazy, but not necessarily lazy. It just may be that we lack the inspiration for that. And so we need to be able to get that inspiration. And that's one way to do it, just by thinking what would be the benefit. And what would be the detriment? What would be the harmful effects of not achieving it? So by thinking of that, I can get inspired. Okay, I'm lethargic, I don't want to change this. You're going to go your whole life like that. What's your life going to be like? And you realize it's going to be bad. I should change it. This is the Bangalore. There's more questions. Bangalore and Mauritius are the Prashna Loka. The two Prashna Lokas. Yes.
How do we stop finding fault in
How do we stop finding fault in ourselves or others?
others?
Oh.
I don't find fault in myself.
Well, generally, if you could stop finding fault in yourself, that's going to go a long way to stop finding fault in others. Or, if you could be more liberal and compassionate with yourself, you would be more liberal and compassionate with others. Like if you expect a lot from yourself, but you're not achieving it, you don't tend to expect that from others. Also, you're not patient with yourself, and you're not patient with them. There's a saying that I know how difficult it is to change myself, so why should I demand that others change themselves? Because a lot of the fault finding is coming from the fact they're doing something you wish they didn't do. It's a whole topic. You need to reflect on what's causing you to find fault. Why do you need to bring people down? Why do you need to make people look bad? Is it like an equal who's outdoing you and you need to bring him down? Is it some insecurity you have? This person's smarter than you. You need to make him look bad. You have to ask those questions. Yes. Hari Bol.
Welcome to Bangalore, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Many times we think that we don't have problems, even if we have problems. We don't realize or we don't accept that we have problems. For example, Ravana. Even others are saying that the others look like problems. But
Yeah.
as a Ram, I didn't accept he has problems. How do we got change?
Yeah.
In that case,
That's the definition of a fool.
how do we realize that we have problems?
I think we should start from the premise that we all have problems. We just may not be aware of them all. That's the fact that we don't love Krishna means we have problems, for sure. And to realize what those problems are, there has to be some desire to become self-aware. If there's no desire, it's going to be very difficult. And so then you might say, where does the desire come from? Well, the desire comes from the need. And where does the need come from? To understand that I need to be self-aware to be Krishna conscious, to make advancement. Otherwise, I stay more or less the same my whole life, because I don't see what I need to overcome. I'm just pretending, that's all. There's a saying in the world of psychology, what are you pretending not to know? It's like, what are you afraid to face? So in my experience, nothing happens unless you have a desire to make things better. And so it's kind of, one answer to your question is it's kind of a frame of mind or a kind of consciousness that as we progress in devotional service, we're supposed to develop, which is just more self-awareness of what I need to improve on, where I need to work, how. Okay, we all need to be more humble. We all need to be more controlled. But specifically, how do I need to do that? How do you need to do it? What's the specific issues you're dealing with? I need to be more detached. What are you specifically attached to? These kinds of questions.
Or should we have at least one mentor whom we trust totally?
Yeah. Who could be honest and tell you, this is where you need to work. Yeah. That would be fantastic. Everybody get a mentor. My blessing. One last question. We went over time.
You were telling like if we are discouraging material life, then it is not good. It is like tamasic. But in spiritual life, you were telling if we are discouraging spiritual life, then it is okay. Like how I was not able to listen.
I wasn't talking about material life. I was saying if you're discouraged in your spiritual life, it's tamasic. If you see a fault and that discourages you, that's a tamasic response. The response should be, oh, here's a fault, we need to work on it. The tamasic response is, I'm so bad. Then you don't work on it. The rajasic response could be, I don't feel like it, it's not practical, I don't need to. I can still distribute a lot of books every day, even with this fault. The more sattvic response is, I need to overcome it. It's an obstacle. Is that okay? Can we stop? You have an announcement? Okay. Hare Krishna, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. India time. What time is 7 a.m. India time? 7:30? Sometime.
No, we start on time.
They said they start on time? We'll see you tomorrow. Okay.
Get late for office.